Eating Christmas in the Kalahari. This article, Eating Christmas in the Kalahari, describes anthropologist Richard Lee's attempt to thank the Kung people by buying them this large ox for their Christmas feast. And he expects gratitude, but instead of giving them that, he repeatedly makes fun of it and says the ox it's thin and it's worthless and barely edible. Lee later learns that this is a cultural practice meant to discourage arrogance and maintain humility within the group. And what he interpreted as rudeness was actually a social mechanism for keeping harmony. And I think how the article shows the impact of worldview on cultural meaning, Lee enters this situation with a Western worldview that emphasizes individual generosity and praise for good deeds, and the idea that gifts should be openly appreciated. The Kung worldview, however, values humility and discourages boasting. Because of these different cultural lenses, the same event, like a gift of an ox, as it's generous, yes, the Kung's people see it as potential threat to social balance. One bias in this article, I think, is a clear bias appears when Lee assumes that his way of giving gifts is the normal or the correct way. He just assumes. And he expects gratitude and admiration, believing that the Kung people should interpret this as generosity the same way Westerners would. And that's not always the case. And his worldview led him to misinterpret their teasing as ungratefulness or hostility, when in reality it was a cultural practice rooted in equality and humility. The story forces readers, I think, and Lee himself, to confront the idea that cultural norms are not universal. Something as simple as giving a gift can have a completely different meaning depending on the cultural context. The Kung's behavior seems rude only if judged through a Western and their assumption. Once Lee understood their worldview, he realized that his expectations were not universal truths, but cultural habits. And I think in my culture, we often bring food to someone's home as a sign of respect or hospitality. And an outsider, I don't know, might misinterpret this as showing off or implying that the host's food isn't good enough. The worldview might frame gestures differently, and just like Lee misunderstood, the Kung's teasing. I think a powerful best practice is to probably lift all the judgment and not ask questions before assuming something. And I know sometimes that's hard to do. This article showed that very clearly, and once Lee asked why they insulted the ox, he learned the deeper meaning behind it. And if he had asked earlier, instead of just assuming, it might have caused a lot less confusion. And this demonstrates that curiosity and humility are essential for intercultural communication.